Dr. McKaylee, Chancellor of the University, Professor Petersen, Vice-Chancellor and Rector of the University, Mr. Willem Loh, Chairman of the Council of the University, members of Council President, Professor Witten, presenters of candidates, professors and colleagues, members of faculty, administrative staff of the university, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, and last but certainly not least, the candidates for master's and doctorate degrees, the reason we are gathered here this afternoon. Indeed, it is an extraordinary accomplishment which you have achieved, and I invite everyone present here to join me in a round of applause in appreciation of what you've realized. I'm not really sure why I've been asked to speak to you today. I've always believed that commencement addresses were given by someone that people really wanted to hear, someone who is famous or who has done something staggering like climb Mount Everest blindfolded, or maybe a comedian who could have you rolling in the aisles. Well, sorry for you. I'm no one in particular. I have trouble climbing stairs. And the funniest thing I think I've ever done might have been showing up here today. And as for inspirational, I wonder what plan B would have been had I not shown up. How can you be inspirational to a room full of, I was going to say geeks, but high achievers? You've already accomplished what very few ever achieve, and something your loved ones are probably still wondering how you pulled off. What could be remotely relevant or of interest to people who write dissertations on subjects like the propulsion parameters of penguin poo? Or which can jump higher, the dog flea or the cat flea? Those are actual dissertations, although they were not, I don't believe, done at this university. And by the way, it's the dog flea that jumps higher. I am honored and pleased to address you this afternoon, but truthfully I am privileged and humbled at having this opportunity. You are moments away from being bestowed with some of the highest honors a university can offer. But more importantly, you have positioned yourself to go forward from here and have an immeasurable impact on society and our world at large. You have positioned yourself to be difference makers, and you have positioned yourselves to change the direction of a country and a continent desperately in need of the skills and talents you now possess. I'd like to share two thoughts with you this afternoon, and I'm afraid neither of them are particularly inspirational. The first is our continuing need for more PhDs, and the second is my concern about mental health issues, which are increasingly a disturbing byproduct of postgraduate study worldwide. Hopefully, somewhere near the end, I can find a thought or two which you might find inspirational. I was recently struck by a report from the World Economic Forum's Global Information Study of 2016, which ranked South Africa 137th out of 139 countries for the overall quality of its educational system. It placed South Africa's mathematics and science education last out of 139 countries. These are not statistics of which any of us can be proud. However, it may well have something to do with our failure to produce enough doctoral graduates. In her penetrating review of doctoral education in South Africa, Professor Chaya Herman of the University of Pretoria notes that while South Africa has produced approximately 30,000 PhDs since 1899, Australia, another former British colony, which only introduced the PhD degree in 1948, has awarded more than 94,000 PhDs by 2009. It is evident, she writes, that in spite of the long history of the doctorate here in South Africa, years of exclusivity and discrimination, and the absence of a PhD culture has stunted the development of knowledge production and research capacity at doctoral levels in South Africa with devastating consequences. Although nearly 20% of the national budget is allocated to education, it reflects a lack of appreciation of the systemic nature of our educational system. Understandably, much of our educational spend is directed at primary and tertiary levels where the need is greatest. However, it fails to appreciate the pipeline issues, which is the necessity for doctoral graduates, like many of you here this afternoon, to train the next generation of academics. Less than half of South Africa's full-time academics have PhDs, but as they retire, we are unable to replace them, which should be a national concern as it impacts the very foundation of our academic system. To echo Professor Herman, extreme intervention is necessary to increase the pool of PhD candidates so as to allow for a sufficient supervisory capacity to monitor and guide doctoral studies. This is not meant to be a rant. Rather, what this is a plea for those of you who are uncertain about a professorial life to think again, and for those of you who are committed to academia to appreciate the importance of your contributions and what it can mean to the future of this nation. Some few weeks ago, former African heads of state gathered in Johannesburg to pose solutions to the problem of education and learning in Africa. I was fortunate to be able to attend the meeting and equally pleased to be joined by our Chair of Council. The theme was Disrupting African Education, and whilst there were numerous useful contributions, former Kenyan Prime Minister Raila Odinga was perhaps the simplest and yet most profound. There are three things that need to be done, he implored. One, he said, was research. The second requirement, he remarked, was research. And the third necessity, he stressed, was more research. We have come together today to celebrate the fact that you have long understood Prime Minister Odinga's plea. You have done research. Those of you receiving master's degrees have learned how to think critically, integrate ideas, and even advance in some fashions the information you have grasped. Those of you receiving doctorates have learned how to conduct original research, resulting in the advancement of new knowledge in your field of speciality, the culmination of which has been a dissertation that, until superseded, has made you the world's leading expert on the topic you have researched. You have advanced the boundaries of knowledge, or to put it in the words that Trekkies around the world understand, to boldly go where no one has gone before. Let me say a few words about my other concern, and that is the possible impact which postgraduate studies may have had on your mental health and the possible impact it may have on your professional life. I raise this issue because academia is, needless to say, extremely stressful. The degree and level of intensity that accompanies academic success often has a debilitating impact on one's psyche. Last week, The Atlantic magazine published an article exposing the effects graduate school has on people's mental health. PhD candidates, it stated, suffered from anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts at astonishingly high rates. There are numerous reasons cited, including the fact that roughly 13% of PhD recipients graduate with hundreds of thousands of rands in educated-related debt. This, needless to say, is concerning. I don't know how these figures relate to those of you sitting in front of me, but the mere thought that this too could be a South African problem is something I felt needed to be addressed. The study cited by the Atlantic magazine stated that among those who reported that they recently had suicidal thoughts, 26% assumed that their psychological well-being was better than the norm. We cannot underestimate the desolation, the loss that this can have on a family, a university, a society, a nation. If you think this is yet another American problem being foisted on us here in South Africa, just remember that a little more than 6 months ago, the University of Cape Town lost a brilliant cardiologist, Professor Bongani Mayosi, who committed suicide following a struggle with depression. One of you, perhaps more than one, will turn out to be the next John Nash, the founder of game theory, for which he won the 1994 Nobel Prize in Economics. If you don't know of John Nash, he wrote one of the shortest PhD dissertations ever published, entitled Non-Cooperative Games. It was 26 pages long and cited only 2 references. For those who are not mathematicians, perhaps you will remember the 2001 Oscar-winning movie, A Beautiful Mind, based on the life of John Nash. Unfortunately, throughout much of his career, Nash displayed many characteristic symptoms of schizophrenia, including hallucinations, delusions, fear of persecution, and lack of interpersonal relations. A troubled genius struggling within himself. Your success today does not mean that you are immune to the diabolical effects of depression, anxiety, or schizophrenia. If I leave you with anything to ponder this afternoon, it is this: look after yourself. We cannot afford to lose you to the ravages of mental illness, which is so easy to do when we are dominated by what other people think of us and tell us. We live in a world in which we are deeply influenced by others, what we read, to whom we listen, to what we see. We constantly think of things, but they are things external to ourselves. Thinking about ourselves is frightening. It exposes us to a certain vulnerability which is difficult to confront. And yet confronting ourselves is precisely what is required in dealing with mental health issues. A deep, probing, painful introspection to look inward and understand what it is that we intuitively know, to think for ourselves, to experience ourselves as we are ourselves. You have completed a course of study that has involved controlled or applied thinking. It has been directed and focused, aimed at understanding an issue or creating something new. It has been goal-oriented thinking, which has been arduous, painful, time-consuming, frustrating, and in the end, as you sit here today, hopefully rewarding. To think for yourself is no less demanding. It takes courage and unfathomable resolve. Introspective thinking comes from deep inside, where you truly allow yourself to be alone, free from distractions and preconceptions. Thinking for yourself may seem obvious and of little or no relevance whatsoever to the world you're opposed to enter. I offer it to say only this, that in an academic world where it is publish or perish, in commerce where it is what have you done for me lately, it is important to be grounded and rooted in the essence of yourself. Will it prevent depression, suicide, mental illness? I don't know. But being true to yourself because you understand who you are, I think, cannot but help. I am enormously taken by the words of A.C. Grayling, a British philosopher and author of more than 20 books, including Thinking of Answers. He is fond of reminding people that the average person's lifespan is less than 1,000 months, and is appalled that our mass education system exists almost exclusively for people in the first 2 decades of life. He believes that education should be a lifelong endeavor, and that true education provides people with a broad knowledge of culture and history, enabling them to appreciate the amenities of civilized life, to understand what they encountered in their experiences as citizens of the world, and to relate with greater insight and generosity to others. That strikes me as what this university has tried to instill within you, and what you have so diligently worked to achieve. Finally, resilience, commitment, and dedication have brought you here today. Courage, compassion, and above all, character will create your tomorrow. Without question, you will be challenged along the way. You can expect failures and disappointments and the constant nagging self-doubt of whether or not you have lived up to your fullest potential. But regardless, remember always, be true to yourself. So, be inspired by who you are, what you have accomplished, and the greatness that awaits you. We have gathered here today not to celebrate the end of a journey, but to revel in the excitement of a new beginning, the transition you are making from one preparing for the future to one creating the future. You are the finest that this university could possibly produce. It is within you to go forth and do great things, but whether you do or not, go forth and simply be. I will leave the last words to Grayling, who says it much more eloquently than I ever could. If we honor the obligation we have to ourselves to develop, to the best of our ability, the constellation of interest and passions and talents that we have, even if we don't succeed, never win a gold medal, never get knighted, never get published, that in and itself is the good life. All that I can add to that is, go and have not just a good life, have a great life. Congratulations, class of 2018.